My Hero Academia Chapter 404, titled We Love You, All Might, is a special one. First off, Bakugo is back. I wouldn't say I was the biggest Bakugo fan before, but honestly, after experiencing things without him for so long, I definitely appreciate his involvement a whole lot more. Not only that, but we now know more about One For All's secret power than ever before. It explains a lot about how the quirk works, along with maybe quirks in general. This all begins with yet another reminder of Sir Night Eye's tragic prediction for All Might. If you somehow don't remember, despite the countless reminders, Night Eye's foresight quirk allowed him to see bits of another person's future, kind of like a flashback of events that have yet to come, even if they're several years away. 5 years ago, after All Might almost died against All For One, Sir Night Eye saw the fate that awaited the symbol of peace if he continued to be a hero despite his condition. He would one day encounter a villain, and what awaited him would be an unspeakably gruesome end. But being as heroically stubborn as he is, All Might continued to fight the good fight despite his former sidekick's protests and eventual death. We've seen All Might reflect on that fact a ton of times now. When the world went to hell after the First War, he seriously contemplated his path. But with things being in such bad shape, he couldn't afford to stay away from the action. This reached a whole new level of urgency when Endeavor, Hawks, and a whole gang of heroes failed to stop All For One. All Might gave that fight all he had, and did actually manage to stall the Demon Lord for a good while. But now, as All For One holds him overhead, fully prepared to rip the hero in two, things are looking worse than ever. This is more than likely the deciding moment as to whether or not Sir Night Eye's prediction comes to be. For the record, his predictions have always been 100% accurate, or at least they were before Deku proved him wrong by saving Eri and defeating Overhaul. But one miss in an entire lifetime of hits doesn't totally invalidate the quirk's power. This was more of an outlier than anything else. But at the very least, it proved that defying fate isn't a total impossibility. To really grasp the importance of this chapter, we need to keep all of this in mind. Otherwise, you might miss what's really going on. Horikoshi dedicates an entire panel to the wind blowing. If this wasn't set up before, it might seem a little silly. Continuing the trend of this war being observed by people all over, we've got a farmer herding sheep and thinking about baking a pie. Low-key, I might actually do the same. Right now, it's the perfect time of year for pumpkin pie. Little off topic, but if you got a personal pie tier list, I would love to hear it. Anyways, we've got a guy sneezing, which I'm sure is exactly the sort of riveting, exciting content that we all love this series for. Next, we've got a guy in a room that looks like me after staying up all night playing Minecraft. There's a supervisor yelling at his fellow employees to worry about their deadlines instead of far-off dangers. And given the current events of the real world, this honestly feels a bit topical. When you're far away from the turmoil of a foreign country, it's all too easy to just ignore the whole thing. After that, we have a person clasping their hands together as if in prayer. And I know all this sounds unimportant, but trust me, there is a reason for all of this. It's more than a year's worth of foreshadowing all coming together. We've got a familiar meteorologist mentioning that the wind current was acting strangely. Way back with chapter 374, we saw this same American woman talk about the weather on a late night newscast. There was said to be a rapidly growing and already massive cumulonimbus storm system spreading over Japan. That's a very dense vertical cloud. There was even a possibility of it traveling across the world and affecting the weather in North America. A major cause of this was believed to be the many heat spikes generated by Endeavor, Dabi, and Shoto. The name of that chapter was Butterfly Effect. The concept that even a seemingly insignificant change or event can have major and or far-reaching effects in complex systems. Meryl, the weather lady, even went off script to question the possibility. She wondered if it was the fate of superpowered society, which began with just a single glowing baby, to descend into chaos. Meryl was very against the world's collective stance to pander to the whims of All For One. With full determination, she expressed that the power of a single man can change the world. The scale of this storm was already unprecedented. For it to now be even stronger is pretty crazy. As Bakugo stood by his lonesome atop the UA floating fortress, Deku's struggle against Shigaraki itself was on the scale of a localized natural disaster. It's mind-boggling to think that Deku still hasn't fully realized the potential power of his quirk. It makes sense why All For One is so hell-bent on stealing it. Just then, Meryl's colleagues let her know that her previous report had made its way online and seemed to be going viral. Someone was clenching their fists in anticipation. Then we'd have a heteromorphic man named Martin watching the scene unfold on TV with an open window. He was called for dinner, but struggled to take his eyes off the unfolding battle. He paused for a moment before expressing his desire for All Might not to die. Bakugo, despite the recent reconstruction of his heart, was quick to recognize the situation. From there, Deku turned to him as if compelled by an instinct even beyond the sensory capabilities of danger sense. As he moved, Shigaraki remained dumbfounded for a moment. Deku's reinforced black whip chain was still holding him, but that wasn't the reason he stopped moving. He absolutely brutalized Bakugo. In fact, he intended to use the young hero's death against Deku, just as All For One now plans to do with All Might. The only reason Deku didn't completely lose his mind and therefore make All For One all the more easy to steal was because there was still a chance for his friend to survive. Shigaraki overheard that, but what came next was well beyond simply surviving. Bakugo rocketed towards Deku immediately at an unbelievable pace. And with perfect synchronization, the two young heroes grabbed hold of one another. I know they spent a long time training and doing hero work together, but this synergy is next level. In fact, Bakugo is finally on Deku's level. While maintaining the momentum, Deku shifted his comrade's trajectory. They locked eyes with similarly expanded pupils. The resilience was written all over Bakugo's face, but the second user of One For All, who has a very similar face, was not happy and called out to Deku. It was clear that Deku planned on using his gear shift quirk yet again. But it was too soon. He wouldn't be able to avoid the blowback this time. From his perspective, it needed to be saved for a more pivotal moment of the battle that would assure their victory. Deku didn't even respond. This was just as important. It didn't take long for the second user to comprehend the boy's insistence, as right beside him was a newly forming vestige, the sight of which made him avert his gaze. Deku and Bakugo continued. After swinging him around completely, Deku finally activated the second's gear shift quirk. This allowed them to momentarily manipulate space-time and achieve speeds that defy the laws of physics. Just before release, Bakugo made his own preparations for acceleration. Then, Deku threw him with as much power as he possibly could. And if Eraserhead's baseball test is anything to go by, Deku sure has gotten much stronger. Bakugo was moving so fast that he looked like one of Frieza's death beams. Shigaraki started mocking the futility of their efforts since he was sure Bakugo wouldn't be able to make it to All Might in time. It was practically impossible, but he was also pretty sure that Deku already knew that. On account of the connection between their two powers, Shigaraki knew that the vestige of All Might within One For All used to always appear faint and underdeveloped. But that was because All Might was still alive. But now, that vestige was looking a lot more solid. It was finally taking form, and they both knew exactly what that meant. With a wicked smile reminiscent of All For One, Shigaraki declared that All Might had shown the world a dream. And with his death, that dream would come to a crushing end and bring the world back to its harsh reality. Bakugo moved as fast as he possibly could to stop All For One from ripping his favorite hero apart. All Deku could do at this point was have faith in his friend to make it in time and get the job done. But that desire wasn't his alone. Just then, the very same leaf from before that I promised you guys was important made an appearance next to Deku's face. This was the power of someone's clenched fist. The power of a person's deep exhale. The power of the late Night Eye's desire to change things and avoid All Might's death. Just like Night Eye said on his deathbed, there was an energy to be found in all these things. This was the energy to be found in the collective yearning for a certain outcome. In other words, the power of wishing. Meryl's words about the butterfly effect were replayed as Bakugo continued forward. The hopes, prayers, desires, and wishes of countless people all around the world centered on Bakugo and propelled him even further. This isn't hyperbole. Desire is a literal source of power in this world. And this is not the first time we've seen it. Again, Deku was able to defy fate thanks to this very same power. Sir Night Eye believed that this was because all that energy was centered on Deku. It could even be said that in his battle against All For One during the Kamino incident, All Might, despite the embers of One For All finally going dark within him, was empowered by this very same energy, the hopes of so many that gave him the strength to win. This is the secret power of One For All. All For One is the universal thief of power. One for All is a universal recipient of power. These stolen quirk vestiges within All for One are restless, wrathful, and unhappy. The vestiges of previous One for All wielders remain as guides and retain the very same beliefs and desires as they did in life. If the second and third users continued to refuse Deku, he would have never been able to access their power. Bakugo doesn't literally have One for All, but he is forever connected to it. My Hero Academia's films and various side stories have almost all been confirmed to be canon over the course of the manga's last 100 chapters or so. Bakugo temporarily receiving the power of One for All during the second movie is no exception. We saw All Might's vestige visit him as he was on the verge of passing away. The metaphorical representation of All Might's spark, the 6-star card, was one shared by both Deku and Bakugo. And without even speaking, their thoughts and feelings have now become one. Previously, it took the restrictions of One for All being removed with the help of Aries' rewind quirk to get to such a level and tap into this hidden ability. But now that the quirk has naturally been taken to such impressive heights, this energy can be readily used to usher in the very future the world desires. As tears surrounded the determination in his eyes, Bakugo remembered how he felt after believing himself to be responsible for the end of the Symbol of Peace. It was his desire to redeem himself and save his hero from such a horrific fate. And he did! All for One's arms were blown off, and Bakugo had All Might within his grasp. Now, this next part is really easy to miss. But yet again, Plot Armor got it right! 3 years ago, we made a video predicting an evolution of Bakugo's quirk that would allow him to produce explosions with his entire body. And what do we have here? Bakugoat doing exactly that! I swear, at this point, we are going to need a victory lap when this series finally comes to a close. The Plot Army deserves a compilation of everything we've gotten right over the years. This is hype! Deku and the second user immediately saw All Might's vestige revert to its more incorporeal appearance. All Might was stunned. In utter disbelief, he barely managed to say Bakugo's name while All for One's frustration mounted. All Might really believed he was going to die, and regenerating those lost limbs will only accelerate All for One's inevitable removal from existence. And at this point, going after All Might again probably wouldn't be worth it. But with his increased volatility, it's hard to say what he'll choose to pursue. Whatever the case, Bakugo finally gave us his first words since coming back to life. Time to win this. This chapter was an absolute joy to read and cover, and I hope you guys enjoyed and are really feeling the excitement of this series right now. As always, I'm Sliceable Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.